Let's begin at the beginning, not with a law, but with a life. Steven Bartlett was born in Botswana and raised in England, in a household that was far from privileged. He dropped out of university at 19, moved into a house with strangers he barely knew, and with little more than a laptop, an obsession with social media, and a refusal to accept the ordinary. He began to build something. By his mid-20s, he had co-founded Social Chain, a social media marketing company that would grow into a global force, eventually going public on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. He became the youngest ever dragon on the BBC's Dragon's Den. He launched one of the most listened to podcasts on the planet, and along the way he sat across the table from some of the most remarkable minds of our era, scientists, billionaires, athletes, artists, philosophers, and leaders, and he listened. Deeply, obsessively. What emerged from all of that, from the building, the failing, the rebuilding, the interviewing, the studying, the suffering, and the succeeding, is this: 33 laws, not tactics, not trends. Laws, principles so fundamental, so grounded in human psychology and behavioral science, that Bartlett argues they will work not just today, but 100 years from now. He organizes these laws into 4 great pillars. The first pillar is about the self, who you are, how you think, and the internal architecture of success. The second is about the story, how you communicate, persuade, and make people believe. The third is the philosophy, the operational mindset that underpins great businesses and great lives. And the fourth is the team, how to find, attract, and lead extraordinary people. These are not motivational platitudes. They are battle-tested insights, backed by psychology, neuroscience, and the lived experiences of some of the world's greatest performers. Some of them will comfort you. Some of them will challenge you. Some of them will make you uncomfortable in exactly the way you need to be. So let us begin. Pillar 1, the self. Who you are determines everything you will ever build. Before strategy, before team, before story, there is self. This first pillar is the foundation of everything that follows. Law 1. Fill your 5 buckets in the right order. Imagine your life as a system of 5 buckets. Each bucket represents a dimension of your capability in the world. The first bucket is knowledge, what you understand. The second is skills, what you can do. The third is network, who you know. The fourth is resources, what you have access to, including money, tools, and opportunities. And the fifth is reputation, what others believe about you. Now here is the critical insight. Most people try to fill these buckets in the wrong order. They chase resources, money, status, titles, before they have the knowledge or skills to manage them. They try to build a network before they have anything of value to bring to a relationship. They seek reputation before they have done anything worthy of one. Bartlett argues that the sequence matters enormously. You must begin with knowledge, read voraciously, study the field you want to master, understand the principles, the history, the mistakes, the breakthroughs. Knowledge is the only bucket that cannot be taken from you. Markets collapse, businesses fail, relationships end, but what you know stays with you. From knowledge flows skill. Skill is knowledge in action. It is the practical application of what you have learned, refined through repetition, through failure, through feedback. The more you practice, the more skilled you become, and skill is what makes you genuinely valuable, not just to yourself, but to others. And as your skills develop, your network begins to grow organically, authentically. People are drawn to those who can genuinely help them, teach them, challenge them. You stop networking as a transactional exercise and start building real relationships based on mutual value. A strong network naturally opens doors to resources, capital, connections, platforms, partnerships. And as you consistently deliver value using those resources, your reputation solidifies. People talk about you. Doors open before you even knock. Opportunities arrive that you didn't have to chase. The mistake, and it is an incredibly common one, is to try to skip ahead. To take a high-paying job purely for the money before developing real skills. To leverage your reputation before it is truly earned. These shortcuts create unstable foundations. The skyscraper built on weak ground does not stand when the storm comes. Start with knowledge, build the skill, let the rest follow. Law 2. You must become the most consistent person you know. Consistency is not glamorous. It does not make for exciting stories at dinner parties. Nobody posts on social media about the 300th day in a row they showed up to do the work. And yet, consistency is one of the most powerful forces in the universe of human achievement. Bartlett makes a point that strikes at the heart of why most people fail to reach their potential. We dramatically overestimate what we can do in a short burst of intense effort, and we catastrophically underestimate what we can achieve through sustained, consistent action over years. Think about the person who goes to the gym every day for a month and then stops. Compare them to the person who goes 3 times a week for 5 years. The first person's results disappear almost as quickly as they appeared. The second person's results compound. Their body changes. Their habits deepen. Their identity shifts. They become someone who exercises, not someone who tried to exercise once. The same principle applies to every domain. Writing 1 blog post a week for a year produces 52 pieces of content. That content builds an audience, develops your voice, sharpens your thinking, and creates compounding returns. The person who writes 10 posts in a frenzy and then burns out produces a fraction of the value. Consistency is also about trust. When you consistently show up for your team, for your clients, for your audience, you build something that no single heroic act can replicate: reliability. And reliability is the bedrock of reputation. But how do you maintain consistency when motivation fades? Bartlett's answer is simple and profound. You stop relying on motivation entirely. Motivation is an emotion. Emotions fluctuate. Discipline is a system. Systems are stable. You build your environment, your schedule, your commitments in such a way that showing up becomes the default, not the exception. The most consistent person in the room almost always wins. Not the most talented, not the most well-resourced, the most consistent. Law 3. You must never compromise your non-negotiables. Every person who achieves something significant has a set of core principles, values so deeply held that they function as the operating system of their life. These are not preferences. They are not things you hold onto when it's convenient. They are the things you will sacrifice for. They are your non-negotiables. Bartlett describes the danger of compromising these values vividly. In the early days of building Social Chain, there were moments when he was presented with shortcuts, deals that would make money but require him to compromise his integrity, partnerships that would scale the business but misalign with his values, decisions that looked smart on a spreadsheet but felt wrong in his gut. Every time he compromised on something he believed was non-negotiable, it cost him, not just emotionally, but practically. Businesses built on compromised values develop cracks. Teams built without integrity eventually fracture. Reputations built on hollow foundations eventually collapse. Conversely, every time he held the line, even when it cost him in the short term, the decision proved right in the long run. Not always immediately. Sometimes holding your non-negotiables means losing a deal, a client, even a friendship. But it earns you something more valuable: self-respect, authentic relationships, and a reputation that is actually yours. The law here is this: know your non-negotiables before you are tested, because you will be tested. The pressure to compromise comes when you are most vulnerable, when you are desperate for revenue, when the relationship feels important, when the opportunity seems too good to pass up. If you have not already decided in advance what you will not do, you will make the wrong decision under pressure every time. Write them down. Say them out loud. Make them part of how you introduce yourself to partners and teams. Your non-negotiables are not weaknesses, they are your strength. Law 4. You must be the scientist of your own life. Most people sleepwalk through their lives, making decisions based on assumptions they have never tested. beliefs they inherited rather than chose, and habits they formed without intention. The scientist of their own life does something different. They experiment, they hypothesize, they observe, they adjust. Bartlett advocates for treating your life with the same rigor a scientist brings to a laboratory. If you believe a certain morning routine will make you more productive, test it. Track the results. Adjust the variables. If you believe a certain type of marketing will grow your business, run the experiment, measure the outcome, iterate based on data. This is not about becoming cold or robotic. It is about intellectual honesty. It is about caring enough about your outcomes to actually pay attention to what works and what doesn't, rather than continuing to do what feels comfortable or what your peers are doing. The scientist of their own life asks, what assumptions am I making that I've never actually verified? What beliefs are costing me without my realizing it? What experiments could I run this month that might change everything? This mindset, curious, open, evidence-based, is one of the most powerful competitive advantages a person can cultivate. It turns mistakes from tragedies into data. It turns uncertainty from something to fear into something to explore. And it makes growth not an occasional accident but a continuous, deliberate process. Law 5. You must not ignore the psychological trap of sunk cost. Here is a trap that has destroyed more careers, businesses, and relationships than almost any other force in human decision-making. The sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue investing in something, time, money, energy, emotion, simply because you have already invested in it, regardless of whether continuing makes rational sense. We stay in bad relationships because we have been in them for years. We hold on to failing business ventures because we have poured our savings into them. We pursue careers that make us miserable because we spent 4 years getting the degree. The past investment is the sunk cost. It is gone. It cannot be recovered. And yet our brains are wired to treat it as a reason to keep going, as though quitting means the past investment was wasted. Bartlett argues that the truly successful person learns to make decisions based entirely on the present and the future, not the past. The only relevant question is, given where I am right now, with what I know right now, is this the best use of my next unit of time, money, and energy? If the honest answer is no, even if you have already sacrificed enormously to get here, the right decision is to stop and redirect. This requires a particular kind of courage. The courage to admit that a past decision was wrong without letting that admission trap you into compounding the error. The greatest investors in the world know this. The greatest leaders know this. The ability to cut losses, pivot, and redirect is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of extraordinary intellectual clarity. Don't let what you've already paid define what you pay next. Law 6. You must protect and fuel your biological engine. Everything you want to achieve, every goal, every ambition, every relationship, every creative breakthrough, depends on one thing above all others: your physical body. Your brain is an organ. Your energy is a biological resource. And yet most ambitious people treat their bodies as afterthoughts, squeezing in a jog between 16-hour workdays and surviving on caffeine and stress. Bartlett is emphatic on this point. The highest performing people in the world are not those who sacrifice sleep for productivity. They are those who understand that sleep, nutrition, movement, and recovery are not luxuries. They are the fuel of the engine that powers everything else. The science is unambiguous. Sleep deprivation impairs cognitive function, emotional regulation, decision-making, creativity, and memory consolidation. Even modest sleep restriction, 6 hours a night instead of 8, produces cognitive deficits equivalent to being legally drunk. The executive who brags about sleeping 4 hours is not a high performer. They are a compromised one, just too impaired to notice. Similarly, the food you eat is not merely fuel for your muscles. It is information for your brain. Blood sugar spikes and crashes create corresponding crashes in focus and mood. Chronic inflammation, driven by poor diet, impairs neurological function. The gut microbiome, which researchers have only recently begun to understand, has a profound bidirectional relationship with mental health and cognitive performance. And exercise, not just for aesthetics or longevity, but for immediate practical performance. A single bout of aerobic exercise increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which Bartlett describes as fertilizer for the brain. It enhances learning, creativity, mood, and executive function for hours afterward. Treat your body like the most important piece of equipment you own, because it is. Law 7. You must become comfortable with discomfort. Everything worth having in life exists on the other side of discomfort. The difficult conversation, the cold call, the moment you share your idea and risk being ridiculed, the day you leave the safety of employment and step into the terrifying freedom of building something of your own. Bartlett traces this back to evolutionary biology. Our brains are wired for safety and comfort because, for most of human history, discomfort was genuinely dangerous. The rustling in the bushes might have been a predator. The unfamiliar tribe might have meant violence. Staying close, staying safe, staying known, these were survival strategies. But we no longer live in that world. The discomforts that most ambitious people face today, embarrassment, rejection, uncertainty, failure, are not life-threatening. They feel threatening because our brains have not updated their software in 100,000 years. But the danger is not real. What this means is extraordinary. The discomfort that feels like a warning sign is often actually a direction sign. The thing you are most afraid to do is frequently the thing most worth doing. The conversation you have been avoiding is usually the one that most needs to happen. Bartlett talks about developing what he calls a comfort with discomfort, not the absence of fear, but the practiced ability to act in the presence of it. Every time you do the uncomfortable thing, your brain updates its threat assessment. The discomfort threshold rises. What was once terrifying becomes merely challenging. What was challenging becomes routine. Seek the discomfort. Lean into it deliberately. Because on the other side of it is growth, and on the far side of growth is everything you want. Law 8. When you achieve your goals, you won't feel the way you think you will. This is one of the most quietly devastating laws in the book, and one of the most important. We are terrible at predicting how achieving our goals will make us feel. This psychological phenomenon is called affective forecasting, and decades of research confirm that human beings consistently overestimate how good their successes will make them feel, and for how long. Bartlett describes a pattern he observed both in his own life and in the lives of nearly every high achiever he has interviewed: the arrival fallacy. You work for years toward a goal, a revenue milestone, a title, a relationship, a body, believing that when you get there, everything will feel different. You will feel satisfied, content, happy, complete. And then you get there, and after the initial rush, which is real but brief, you feel almost the same, maybe slightly better, maybe slightly worse, because now the goal is gone and you no longer have the forward pull of striving toward it. This is not a cynical observation. It is a liberating one, because it means the path is the point. The growth, the learning, the relationships built along the way, the person you become in the pursuit, these are where the real value lives. The destination is almost always less significant than the journey. The practical implication is profound. If you are delaying your happiness until you achieve the goal, you are likely to wait forever. True satisfaction comes from the process of meaningful work, not from the moment of arriving. Find the work that is meaningful now. Engage with it fully now. The goals matter, but only as a direction, not as a destination. Pillar 2. The story. In a world drowning in information, the ability to tell a compelling story is a superpower. This second pillar is about communication, persuasion, and the art of making people believe. Law 9. Understand the power of perception. Reality does not speak for itself. People do not experience the world directly, they experience their perception of it. And perception is malleable, shapeable, constructed. This is not a lesson in manipulation. It is a lesson in communication. Bartlett argues that some of the greatest products, ideas, and movements in history failed not because they were inferior, but because they were perceived as inferior. And some mediocre ideas succeeded spectacularly because they were perceived as revolutionary. Perception is often more powerful than reality. This has enormous implications for how you present yourself, your business, your ideas. The packaging matters. The framing matters. The context in which you introduce an idea shapes how it is received. Whether you are pitching to investors, selling to customers, leading a team, or simply making an argument to a friend, the way you frame what you say is as important as what you say. One of Bartlett's favorite examples is pricing. Two products that are functionally identical can have entirely different sales volumes simply because of how their prices are presented. A product priced at £99 is perceived very differently from one priced at £100, even though the difference is £1. A subscription described as less than the cost of a daily coffee is perceived differently from the same subscription described as £30 per month, even though they are the same thing. Shape the perception. Control the frame, not through deception, but through thoughtful, strategic communication that helps people understand the true value of what you offer. Law 10. You must never compete on price alone. This law is simple and stark. If your competitive strategy is to be the cheapest, you are on a race to the bottom, and at the bottom there is nothing. There is always someone willing to charge less than you. There is always a competitor with lower overhead, a different cost structure, a willingness to sacrifice margin for volume. If your only differentiator is price, you are one competitor away from extinction. The great businesses, the ones that endure, that build loyalty, that create genuine wealth, compete on value, on experience, on story, on relationship, on quality, on innovation. These are things that cannot simply be undercut. Bartlett points to Apple as the canonical example. Apple's products are rarely the most technically advanced options on the market. They are almost never the cheapest. But Apple competes on design, on user experience, on brand story, on the feeling of belonging to a certain kind of person. And people pay extraordinary premiums for all of that consistently, decade after decade. What is the thing you offer that cannot be commoditized? What is the dimension on which you are genuinely, meaningfully better? And how are you communicating that? These are the questions that determine whether you build a business or just a hustle. Law 11. You must grab the first 5 seconds. Every piece of communication you will ever create, every pitch, every email, every social media post, every presentation, every conversation that matters begins with a battle you have to win before anything else happens. The battle for attention. In a world where the average human attention span has shrunk dramatically, some estimates put it at 8 seconds. The first moments of your message are not merely an introduction. They are everything. If you do not capture attention in the first 5 seconds, you lose the audience entirely. It does not matter what brilliance follows because no one is there to receive it. This law has profound implications. It means you cannot afford to bury your best material in a preamble. You cannot ease into a pitch with 3 minutes of context setting. You cannot open an email with pleasantries before you get to the thing that matters. You must lead with something so compelling, so unexpected, so emotionally resonant or intellectually provocative that the audience cannot choose to look away. The master communicators, the best marketers, the best speakers, the best writers understand this intuitively. They open with a story. They open with a counterintuitive claim. They open with a question that creates an irresistible itch in the mind. They open with something that creates what storytellers call a curiosity gap, a space between what you know and what you desperately want to know. Your first sentence is your most valuable real estate. Treat it accordingly. Law 12. You must use the Goldilocks principle in your pricing and offers. We have touched on this in the context of perception, but it deserves its own full treatment because of how reliably and powerfully it works. When people are presented with options, they exhibit a consistent and deeply human bias. They gravitate toward the middle, not the cheapest option which feels inferior, not the most expensive option which feels indulgent or risky, the middle option which feels safe, sensible, reasonable. This is the Goldilocks principle, named for the fairy tale character who rejected the extremes and chose what was just right. And it is not merely a preference. It is a predictable, exploitable pattern in human decision-making. The practical application is elegant. When structuring your offerings, whether you are pricing products, designing subscription tiers, or presenting options in a negotiation, present 3 choices. Make the cheapest option clearly insufficient for serious needs. Make the most expensive option clearly premium. And position the option you most want people to choose in the middle. The middle option will, reliably, outsell the others. Not because it is necessarily the best value in absolute terms, but because the human brain uses the available context to make sense of unfamiliar situations, and the middle feels right relative to the extremes. The same principle applies in negotiation. If you want someone to agree to X, open with a higher number, not outrageously higher, but meaningfully higher. This anchors the perception of what is reasonable, and X begins to look like a compromise rather than a demand. This is not manipulation. It is understanding how human beings actually make decisions, and designing your offers accordingly. Law 13. You must make your customer the hero. One of the most common and costly mistakes in marketing and communication is making yourself the hero of the story. The brilliant entrepreneur who built the incredible company, the innovative brand that revolutionized the industry, the genius product that changed everything. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Your customer does not care about your story. They care about their story. They care about their problems, their dreams, their identity, their sense of themselves. They are the hero of the only story that matters to them, their own. Bartlett draws on the framework of the classic hero's journey. Every compelling story has a hero who faces a challenge, encounters a guide who gives them tools and wisdom, overcomes obstacles and emerges transformed. In your customer's story, you are not the hero. You are the guide. You are Gandalf, not Frodo. You are Yoda, not Luke. You are the mentor who equips the hero for their journey, not the one who takes the glory. This reframing changes everything about how you communicate. Instead of telling people about your product's features, you tell them about the transformation they will experience. Instead of talking about your credentials, you talk about the problems you understand their problems, told back to them with such precision that they feel completely seen. Instead of celebrating your success, you celebrate theirs. Make the customer the hero, put yourself in the role of guide, and watch the relationship transform. Law 14. You must speak in the language of your audience. This law sounds simple. It is not. Most people, even experienced communicators, consistently make the mistake of speaking in their own language rather than in the language of their audience. Every expert develops jargon. Every industry has its terminology, its acronyms, its insider language. And this language is genuinely useful internally. It allows people who share it to communicate quickly and precisely. But the moment it bleeds into external communication, it creates distance instead of connection. Bartlett makes a deeper point here. Speaking in your audience's language is not just about avoiding jargon. It is about understanding what they value, how they think, what they fear, what they dream about, and speaking to all of that directly. It is about meeting people where they are, not where you think they should be. The great communicators can switch registers seamlessly. They can explain a complex technical concept to a technical audience with precision, and then turn around and explain the same concept to a general audience with a metaphor so perfect that it makes the idea feel obvious. They have done the deep work of understanding both the idea and the person they are speaking to. Before any significant communication, before you write the email, give the pitch, post the content, have the conversation, ask, who is this person? What do they care about? What do they already know? And what do they need to believe by the end of this? Then speak to that. Law 15. You must ask binary questions rather than state facts. We discussed the question behavior effect earlier, and it deserves this deeper exploration in the context of persuasion and communication. Research in psychology consistently shows that questions are more persuasive than statements. When you tell someone something, even something true, even something compelling, their brain can passively receive it. It enters their mind without necessarily engaging their agency. But when you ask someone a question, something different happens. They become active. Their mind engages. They construct an answer. They process the information through their own values and beliefs. The most powerful form of this is the binary question, a yes or no question that puts the respondent in a position where the only honest answer aligns with the behavior you are trying to encourage. Here is a simple example from the research. Signs that read "Please recycle" produce certain compliance rates. Signs that ask, "Will you recycle?" produce meaningfully higher ones. The question activates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the psychological discomfort of a gap between how we see ourselves and how we are behaving. Most people see themselves as environmentally responsible. When asked directly whether they will recycle, they feel compelled to answer yes, and then to act consistently with that answer. You can use this principle in sales, in leadership, in parenting, in self-motivation. Instead of telling your team, "We need to improve our response times," ask, "Do we want to be a company known for exceptional customer service?" The answer is obviously yes. And once they have answered yes, they have committed themselves to the standard. The behavior follows from the commitment. Questions unlock agreement. Learn to ask them. Law 16. You must master the science of positivity. How you make people feel in your presence is a form of power, perhaps the most underrated form. People cannot always remember exactly what you said, but they almost always remember how you made them feel. Bartlett draws on decades of research in social psychology and neuroscience to make the case that positive emotional states are not just pleasant, they are functionally superior. When people feel positive, their creativity expands, their problem-solving improves, their willingness to collaborate increases, and their connection to others deepens. This has enormous practical implications for leaders. A leader who creates psychological safety, who makes their team feel genuinely valued, seen, respected, and trusted, gets more from that team in every measurable dimension. More creativity, more honesty, more effort, more loyalty. A leader who rules through fear, pressure, and criticism gets short-term compliance and long-term disengagement. It also has implications for your personal brand and relationships. The person who consistently makes others feel good, who is genuinely interested in people, who acknowledges their contributions, who expresses gratitude and recognition sincerely and specifically, becomes someone people want to be around. They become magnetic. They attract the kinds of relationships and opportunities that others struggle to find. This is not about being falsely cheerful or performing positivity. It is about the genuine practice of appreciation, curiosity, warmth, and recognition. It is about developing the emotional intelligence to meet people where they are and make them feel that their presence matters. Be the person in the room who makes everyone around them feel more capable. Pillar 3. The philosophy. Great businesses and great lives are not built on inspiration alone. They are built on systems, philosophies, and operational principles that work even when the inspiration fades. This third pillar is about how you think and how you operate. Law 17. You must have a bias toward action. Analysis is valuable. Research is necessary. Planning is essential. And then at some point, more quickly than most people are comfortable with, you have to do the thing. Bartlett makes a case for what he calls a bias toward action, a default orientation that prefers doing over deliberating, testing over theorizing, shipping over perfecting. This does not mean acting recklessly or without thought. It means recognizing that in a fast-moving world, the cost of inaction is almost always higher than the cost of imperfect action. Consider two people who both want to start a business. Person A spends a year researching the market, building the perfect business plan, waiting for the ideal moment. Person B spends a week on the basics and then launches something imperfect, rough, but real. Person B starts getting feedback from actual customers. They discover immediately that some of their assumptions were wrong and others were right. They iterate. They improve. After a year, they have 12 months of real-world learning and a product that has been shaped by market reality. Person A has a better business plan and zero traction. The market will tell you things no amount of research can predict. The only way to find out is to enter it. Launch the minimum viable version. Start the conversation. Make the first call. Send the first email. Write the first post. Do the imperfect thing now rather than waiting for the perfect thing that may never arrive. Momentum is a force. Once you are in motion, staying in motion is relatively easy. Getting into motion from a standstill is where most people fail. Bias toward action. Law 18. You must protect your focus from the trivialities of the world. Here is one of the most insidious threats to high performance in the modern era. The unlimited, always-on supply of trivial decisions, minor tasks, and low-stakes distractions that gradually consume all of your cognitive bandwidth. Every decision you make, no matter how small, depletes your mental energy. This is the phenomenon known as decision fatigue. It is well documented in the research and deeply underappreciated in practice. The judge who becomes harsher in their decisions as the day progresses. The shopper who makes worse choices later in a shopping trip. The executive who makes their worst decisions after a day full of meetings. All of these are manifestations of the same phenomenon. The depletion of cognitive resources through accumulated decision-making. The great performers in every field have, often intuitively, developed systems to minimize the number of trivial decisions they face. They eat the same breakfast. They wear variations of the same outfit. They structure their days so that the decisions that require the most clarity, the strategic, creative, high-stakes decisions happen early, when mental resources are fullest. This principle extends beyond decision fatigue. It is also about protecting your attention from the constant pull of the trivial. Every notification, every scroll, every piece of ambient noise and low-stakes stimulation consumes attention that could go towards something that matters. You have a finite number of focus hours in a day. Where they go is entirely up to you, but default behavior in a digital world will take them away from you without your noticing. Guard your focus ferociously. Design your environment to protect it. The most productive people are not the ones who work the longest hours. They are the ones who put their best hours toward their most important work, consistently. Law 19. You must avoid the ostrich effect. We spoke briefly about this in the context of the self, but it deserves full treatment here in the philosophical pillar, because it is so central to how organizations fail. The ostrich effect is the human tendency to avoid information that makes us uncomfortable, to not look at the bank balance when we know it's low, to avoid the difficult performance review conversation, to ignore the customer complaints that suggest a systemic problem, to not read the reports that challenge our strategic assumptions. Leaders who fall into this pattern, and it is more common than any honest audit of leadership culture would be comfortable acknowledging, make decisions in a fog of self-constructed ignorance. They are not evil. They are not lazy. They are human. The brain's avoidance mechanisms are extraordinarily powerful, and they activate most strongly precisely when the information we need is most threatening to our current self-conception. The antidote is cultivating what Bartlett calls a radical commitment to truth, to seek out the uncomfortable information rather than avoiding it, to create organizational cultures where bad news travels fast, where people feel safe bringing problems forward rather than burying them, to build personal habits of honest self-assessment that override the brain's natural tendency toward flattering self-deception. The leader who knows the worst news in the organization before it becomes a crisis is in a position of power. The leader who only hears what makes them feel good is in a position of catastrophic vulnerability. The ostrich's strategy has never worked. The sand offers no protection. Pull your head out and face the reality in front of you, because reality is always more manageable when confronted early than when it has been allowed to compound in the darkness. Law 20. You must use the discipline equation. Motivation is unreliable. It comes in waves, peaks dramatically after an inspiring book or conversation, and then fades, sometimes within hours. The people who wait for motivation to do the important work will be waiting most of their lives. Discipline is different. Discipline is the capacity to do what needs to be done regardless of how you feel in the moment. And Bartlett offers a framework for building it that he calls the discipline equation. The equation is this. Discipline is a function of the value you place on the outcome, minus the perceived difficulty of the process, adjusted by the strength of your environment and systems. What this means in practice: if you do not deeply believe that a goal matters, if you are pursuing it because someone else told you to, or because it seems impressive, or because you think it should matter, your discipline will be weak. You need genuine conviction about why the work is worth doing. But conviction alone is not enough. You also need to have an accurate and ideally reduced perception of difficulty. This is where systems come in. If you make the desired behavior easy and the undesired behavior hard, you have dramatically changed the equation in your favor. The person who prepares their workout clothes the night before, fills their water bottle, and lays out their sneakers finds the morning gym session much easier than the person who has to rummage through the closet half awake. Environment is the silent architect of behavior. Design it deliberately. Put the book on the pillow, not on the shelf. Put the healthy food at eye level in the fridge, the junk food at the back. Schedule the deep work in the morning, not at 4 in the afternoon. Build systems that make your best self the path of least resistance. Discipline is not a character trait you either have or don't have. It is a set of design choices. Law 21. You must create value, not extract it. This law sits at the heart of Bartlett's philosophy about business and human relationships alike, and it is one he returns to again and again. The extractive mindset, the orientation toward taking, how much can I get from this deal, this relationship, this situation, is short-sighted even by purely selfish standards. It optimizes for the immediate transaction at the expense of the relationship. And relationships, not transactions, are where the real wealth, financial and otherwise, accumulates. The value creation mindset asks different questions. What does this person need? What problem can I solve for them? What can I contribute that makes their situation better? Not because contribution is inherently noble, though it is, but because the person who consistently creates value for others becomes indispensable. They become the person everyone wants in the room. They build the kind of trust and goodwill that converts into opportunity over and over again. Bartlett tells a story from the early days of Social Chain. Before the company had significant revenue, before it had the track record to command premium fees, he spent months creating free content that genuinely helped other marketers do their jobs better. He shared proprietary insights, tested strategies, honest assessments of what was working and what wasn't. He asked for nothing in return. The result was that when Social Chain was ready to seek clients, it already had a reputation. It was already trusted. People already felt that they owed Bartlett something, not because he had demanded it, but because he had earned it through consistent, genuine value creation. Give first. Give generously. Give without immediate expectation of return. The returns will come, and they will be larger and more sustainable than anything you could have extracted by taking. Law 22. You must become the best in the world at what you do. This sounds intimidating, and Bartlett addresses that head-on. He is not claiming that you need to be objectively, globally the best in your entire field. What he is arguing is something subtler and more achievable, that you must define your niche with enough specificity that you can genuinely be the best in it. The marketing consultant who is good at general marketing is replaceable. There are thousands of them. The marketing consultant who is the world's best at marketing sustainable fashion brands to Gen Z women in Asia is in a different category entirely. Their specific combination of knowledge, experience, cultural understanding, and network creates a niche where they are genuinely, meaningfully excellent, and where they face far less competition. This is the strategy of specificity. As you narrow your focus, you deepen your expertise. As you deepen your expertise, you build a reputation that compounds. As your reputation compounds in a specific niche, you attract the most valuable clients and opportunities within that niche, which further develop your expertise, which deepens your reputation, and the flywheel accelerates. The question is not, how do I become the best in the world? In some vast, undifferentiated sense. The question is, what combination of skills, experiences, passions, and knowledge do I have that no one else has in quite this configuration? What niche exists at the intersection of those things? And how do I become the undisputed expert in that niche? Law 23. You must adopt the mindset of a scientist. We discussed this briefly in Pillar 1 as it relates to the self, but as a philosophical operating principle for business, it deserves much fuller treatment. The scientific mindset applied to business means you form hypotheses, you test them, you measure the results honestly, and you update your beliefs accordingly. You do not fall in love with your theories. You do not let your ego become attached to your initial assumptions. You follow the evidence wherever it leads. This sounds obvious. It is shockingly rare. Most businesses operate on inherited assumptions, things that worked once, or that someone once believed worked, or that are simply how things have always been done in this industry. These assumptions are almost never examined. They are never tested. They are simply perpetuated until they become so clearly failing that they cannot be ignored, by which point it is often too late. The scientific business, the one that tests its assumptions, measures its experiments honestly, and iterates based on evidence, learns faster than its competitors. It does not make the same mistake twice. It finds the counterintuitive insights that others miss because others were not willing to challenge their assumptions in the first place. Build a culture of experiments. Celebrate honest null results. Experiments that tell you what does not work are just as valuable as those that tell you what does. Create systems that capture and analyze data. And above all, cultivate the intellectual humility to update your beliefs when the evidence demands it. Law 24. You must act now, not eventually. Perfectionism is a form of procrastination wearing more respectable clothing. The person who says, "I'll launch when it's perfect," is often really saying, "I'll launch when I feel safe," which is never. Perfect does not exist. Every version of anything that has ever been created or achieved is a compromise between the ideal in someone's mind and the reality of the world's constraints. The question is not whether it will be perfect. The question is whether it will be good enough to start. And good enough to start is defined by a single criterion. Is it good enough for someone to get genuine value from? If yes, ship it, release it, do it, make the call, take the first step, and then improve it based on what you learn in the real world. This is not an argument for carelessness. Quality matters enormously. But there is a vast middle ground between careless and perfect, and it is in that middle ground, in the done and learning, where success is built. The entrepreneur who launches an imperfect product and iterates will, almost always, outperform the one who waits for perfect. The writer who publishes imperfect work and improves will, almost always, develop faster than the one who endlessly revises in private. The salesperson who makes imperfect calls and learns from each one will, almost always, close more deals than the one who perfects their script in theory before ever trying it in practice. The world rewards doing, not nearly doing, not preparing to do, doing. Pillar 4, the team. No one achieves anything significant alone. The final pillar is about the people, how to find them, attract them, keep them, and lead them. Law 25. You must create a culture that people don't want to leave. Culture is not a foosball table in the break room. Culture is not a set of values painted on the wall. Culture is the lived reality of how people experience working in an organization every day, how decisions are made, how conflict is handled, how success is celebrated, how failure is treated, and whether people genuinely believe their work matters. Culture is also the single most powerful source of competitive advantage in a knowledge economy. Products can be copied. Strategies can be replicated. Technology can be licensed or reverse engineered. But a genuinely exceptional culture, one that consistently attracts, develops, and retains remarkable people, is extraordinarily difficult to replicate. Bartlett describes the elements of great culture in concrete terms. People need to believe in the mission, genuinely, not just as a tagline. They need to feel psychologically safe to speak honestly, challenge ideas, and admit mistakes without fear of punishment. They need to see a clear connection between their individual contribution and the larger purpose of the organization. They need to feel recognized and valued, not through hollow praise, but through genuine investment in their growth and development. And they need to feel that the people leading them are worthy of their trust, not perfect, but honest, not infallible, but accountable, not beyond criticism, but genuinely committed to the shared mission. Great culture is the reason people turn down higher-paying offers from competitors. It is the reason they go the extra mile without being asked. It is the reason they bring their best ideas to their employer rather than hoarding them for a future venture. It is the greatest retention mechanism, the greatest recruitment tool, and the greatest productivity driver that exists. Invest in it with the same seriousness you invest in product, sales, and technology. Law 26. You must lead without a title. Leadership is not a position. It is a behavior. It is a choice that you make every day in every interaction, regardless of where you sit on an organizational chart. Bartlett saw this vividly in the early days of building Social Chain. The people who drove the culture, who attracted others to the mission, who raised the bar for everyone around them, were not always the ones with the biggest job titles. They were the ones who showed up with the most conviction, the most care, the most willingness to do what needed doing without being asked or recognized for it. The converse is also true. Formal authority does not make a leader. A person can hold a senior title in an organization and consistently undermine the culture, damage relationships, and diminish the team through insecurity, rigidity, or ego. Position confers power. Leadership must be earned. What does leading without a title look like in practice? It means taking responsibility for the outcomes you care about without waiting for permission. It means investing in the people around you, helping them grow, solving their problems, being genuinely interested in their success. It means holding yourself to a higher standard than the environment demands, and by doing so, raising the standard for everyone else. You do not need to be a manager to be a leader. You do not need to be a founder to set the tone. Every person in every organization is, at every moment, choosing whether to lead or to follow. Choose to lead. Law 27. You must know the difference between motivation and inspiration. This is a distinction that many leaders miss, and it costs them enormously. Motivation is external. It is the reward, the incentive, the threat, the bonus, the performance improvement plan. It works in the short term for certain behaviors, but it has a ceiling. Motivated people do enough to get the reward and avoid the punishment. They optimize for the visible metric, not for the deeper outcome. Inspiration is internal. It is the sense of meaning, purpose, mission, and belonging that makes people want to give everything they have, not for the reward, but for the work itself, and for the people they are doing it with. Inspired people do not optimize for the metric. They optimize for the outcome they genuinely care about. The leader who can only motivate their team has a team of mercenaries. Give them a better offer and they are gone. The leader who can inspire their team has something altogether more powerful. A group of people who are emotionally invested in the mission, who advocate for the organization outside of work hours, who recruit their talented friends, and who face adversity with resilience rather than resignation. Inspiration comes from clarity of purpose, from being able to answer, in a way that resonates emotionally and not just intellectually, why the work matters. It comes from the leader's own genuine conviction. You cannot inspire people toward a mission you do not yourself believe in. It comes from creating the conditions in which people can experience their own growth, contribution, and belonging. Be the kind of leader people would follow even if you could not pay them. Then also pay them well. Law 28. You must ask who, not how. When you face a massive challenge, scaling a function, solving a complex technical problem, entering a new market, the natural question most people ask is, how do I do this? Bartlett argues that this is the wrong question. The right question is, who can do this? The how question puts you at the center. It assumes that you must personally understand and execute every important function of your business. This works when you are a solo operator. It breaks catastrophically when you are trying to build something that requires capabilities beyond your own. The who question unlocks leverage. It shifts your thinking from what you can do to what you can orchestrate. And the ability to identify, attract, and deploy exceptional people in the areas where they have superior capabilities, while you focus on the areas where you have superior capabilities, is the fundamental skill of scaling. This is also a mindset about humility. Many founders and leaders struggle with the who question because delegating to others feels like admitting limitation. But the greatest CEOs in the world are surrounded by people who are better than them at almost every specific function of the business. Their genius is not in being the best programmer, the best marketer, the best CFO. Their genius is in finding the best of each, aligning them with the mission, and creating the conditions in which they can do their best work. When you face your next major challenge, before asking how, ask, who already knows how to do this? Who has done it before? Who would be extraordinary in this role? And then go find that person. Law 29. You must build a culture of psychological safety. This law is grounded in some of the most important organizational research of the last 2 decades. In particular, a famous study at Google that sought to determine what made their highest performing teams different. The researchers expected to find that the best teams were composed of the most individually talented people. They expected star power to be the determining factor. What they found instead was something far more nuanced and far more accessible. The single most important factor in team performance was psychological safety, the shared belief among team members that it was safe to take interpersonal risks, safe to offer an idea that might be wrong, safe to challenge a colleague's thinking, safe to admit a mistake, safe to be a human being at work, with all the uncertainty and limitation that entails. Teams with high psychological safety learned faster, made fewer serious errors, and performed better on every measure that mattered. Teams with low psychological safety, where people feared looking incompetent, where mistakes were punished, where honest dissent was unwelcome, were consistently worse. The implications for leadership are profound. Every time a leader reacts to bad news by shooting the messenger, they reduce psychological safety. Every time they punish honest mistakes rather than using them as learning opportunities, they reduce psychological safety. Every time they create an environment where people tell them what they want to hear rather than what they need to hear, they have destroyed the very information flow that good leadership depends on. Create an environment where honesty is rewarded, where failure is treated as learning, where the strangest ideas get a genuine hearing, and where people feel safe enough to bring their full intelligence to their work. This is not softness. This is the operating condition for high performance. Law 30. You must set 3 bars for your team. This is one of Bartlett's most operationally specific frameworks, and it is one that resonates with anyone who has ever had to make hearing or performance decisions. He describes 3 bars, 3 non-negotiable standards, that every member of a high-performing team must meet. The first bar is the bar of ability. Can this person do the job? Do they have the skills, knowledge, and competence required to perform at the level the role demands? This seems obvious, but it is remarkable how often people are placed in roles for which their ability is insufficient, promoted beyond their competence, or hired for cultural fit without rigorous assessment of actual capability. The second bar is the bar of values. Does this person share the core values of the organization? Not just in what they say, but in how they behave. A person of extraordinary ability who violates the culture's values is a net negative. They are more destructive than someone of lesser ability who is aligned. A single person who consistently undermines trust, who games metrics instead of pursuing outcomes, who puts their own advancement ahead of the team's success, can poison an entire organization. The third bar is the bar of personality. Does this person elevate the people around them? Do they make the team better by being part of it, not just through their own output, but through their energy, their generosity, their willingness to invest in others? Hire to all 3 bars. Promote to all 3 bars. When someone fails to meet any one of them, address it directly and honestly, with genuine investment in helping them meet it, but also with the clarity that meeting all 3 is not optional. Law 31. You must make diversity a non-negotiable. This is not a law about political correctness. It is a law about performance. Decades of research on team and organizational decision-making converge on a simple, robust finding. Diverse teams make better decisions than homogeneous ones. They consider a wider range of options. They are less susceptible to groupthink. They are more creative. They catch more errors. Why? Because when every person in a room has had roughly similar experiences, similar educational backgrounds, similar cultural frames of reference, they are also likely to share similar blind spots. They will ask the same questions, miss the same risks, and converge on the same range of solutions. The diversity of their capabilities is narrow even if their individual talent is high. When you bring together people of genuinely different backgrounds, different industries, different cultures, different economic experiences, different ways of seeing and processing the world, you create a team that sees more. That covers more of the possibility space. That generates insights no individual member and no homogeneous group would have arrived at alone. But diversity creates value only in the presence of psychological safety and a culture of genuine inclusion. Diverse people in an environment where their perspectives are not actually welcome, or where there is an implicit hierarchy of whose ideas count, do not produce better outcomes. They produce worse ones, because the friction of marginalization is added to the equation without the benefit of genuinely heard diverse thinking. Build diverse teams. Then create the conditions in which that diversity can actually express itself. Law 32. You must understand the difference between leadership and management. Management is the science of controlling and optimizing the existing. It is the careful, systematic process of planning, organizing, monitoring, and adjusting the work of a team or organization to achieve defined outcomes. Management is extraordinarily important. Without good management, even the most inspired team becomes chaotic and inefficient. But management is not leadership, and confusing the two creates organizations that are efficiently heading in the wrong direction. Leadership is the art of creating the future. It is about vision, articulating where we are going and why it matters. It is about inspiring people to commit to that vision not because they are managed to comply with it, but because they have genuinely embraced it as their own. It is about setting the tone through behavior, not proclamation, for the values, the standards, and the culture of an organization. The manager's fundamental question is, how do we do this better? The leader's fundamental question is, are we doing the right thing? Great organizations need both. They need managers who can execute efficiently, optimize processes, develop people's capabilities, and maintain the operational discipline that keeps a complex organization functional. And they need leaders who can keep the organization oriented toward the right long-term direction, who can attract and inspire exceptional people, and who can navigate the inevitable periods of adversity and uncertainty that every organization faces. The confusion arises when organizations try to solve leadership challenges with management tools, when they respond to a crisis of direction or morale with more metrics and process. Management cannot solve a leadership deficit. Only leadership can. Know which is needed in any given moment, and develop the capability to provide both. Law 33. You must leave a legacy worth remembering. Every one of the previous 32 laws has been, in some sense, a preparation for this one. Because all of the knowledge, skill, network, resources, reputation, communication, philosophy, and leadership in the world is, ultimately, in service of something beyond itself. The final law asks the deepest question: what are you building and why? Bartlett is honest about a pattern he has observed in his own life and in the lives of many of the most successful people he has interviewed. The early years are often driven by self-focused motivations, the desire to prove something, to escape something, to achieve status, security, or recognition. And these motivations are not shameful. They are powerful, and they drive a great deal of the work that needed to be done. But at some point, often after reaching a significant milestone and discovering the arrival fallacy we discussed in Pillar 1, the questions shift. The "what am I trying to achieve" gives way to "what am I trying to contribute?" The "how do I get more" gives way to "how do I matter?" Legacy is not about being famous. Most of the people who leave the deepest legacies are not famous at all. Legacy is about impact, about having contributed to the lives of others in ways that persist beyond your direct involvement, about having built something, a company, a community, a body of knowledge, a family, a culture that continues to create value long after you have moved on. The businesses that endure are those built around a genuine contribution to human welfare, a problem meaningfully solved, a capability meaningfully expanded, a joy meaningfully created. The leaders who are remembered are those who elevated the people around them, who invested in others' growth, who created cultures of genuine human dignity. Ask yourself, if I were to disappear tomorrow, what would remain? What of what I have built or contributed would outlast me? And if the answer is unsatisfying, if what remains is mostly numbers in a spreadsheet, it may be time to ask deeper questions about what you are really building and for whom. Build something worth building. Contribute something worth contributing. Be someone worth becoming. Conclusion: the architecture of excellence. Let us return to the beginning, one last time. A young man from Botswana, raised in England, no degree, no family connections in business, no initial capital. Sitting in a shared house with strangers, working on a laptop, trying to figure out how the world actually works. What Steven Bartlett figured out, and what this book distills, is that the architecture of excellence is remarkably consistent. Across industries, across cultures, across generations, the people and organizations that achieve something genuinely significant share a set of principles that look, at their core, like these 33 laws. They fill their foundational buckets before reaching for the ones higher up. They are consistent when others are sporadic. They protect their non-negotiables when the pressure to compromise is highest. They treat their own lives with scientific curiosity. They resist sunk costs and bias toward action. They protect their biological engine. They seek discomfort rather than avoiding it. They tell compelling stories that make their audience the hero. They ask more than they tell. They create more value than they extract. They build psychological safety on their teams. Recruit to all 3 bars, and lead by inspiring rather than managing. And above all, above every tactic, every framework, every tool, they are driven by a mission that matters beyond themselves. They have asked the deepest questions. Why does this work matter? Who does it serve? And what kind of person do I need to become to do it well? None of these laws are magic. None of them are easy. All of them, applied with consistency and conviction over time, are transformative. You have just heard 33 of the clearest maps ever drawn to the territory of excellence. What you do with them is, as always, entirely up to you. The path is yours. Begin.